thank you again for attending today. We have, looks like we have a great group this morning. So with that, I will turn it over to Naja and let her talk about giant hogweed, which I know not a whole lot about other than it's really scary. So thank you, Naja.
Sounds good. Well, you're about to become an expert after this presentation, I hope. And you asked me to correct anything, and I do have to say, I mean, I know I'm speaking to the wrong audience, but you presented me or introduced me as someone from downstate. So as someone from New Paltz, we consider ourselves upstate because we are north of the city. We can have that battle later if you want, Jason. But
no, fair enough. But when you're in the Finger Lakes, I have to say that's downstate. But point well taken. Thank you.
Sounds good. I don't know where they draw the line. Maybe Westchester or something like that becomes downstate. But anyhow, so my name is Naja Kraus. I work for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. I've been working as a forest health scientist since 2005, I think. Goodness, time goes fast. And I started out working more with our defoliator type species and creating protocols for gypsy moth and forest tent caterpillar. And then I moved my way into terrestrial plants. I have a master's in plant science from SUNY Environmental Science and Forestry. And since 2007, I've been coordinating our statewide giant hogweed program. So it started with, just a few sites, and now it's grown into a really big program. We have our training for something like 22 staff that'll be on this year next week. So we're working really hard to, educate people about giant hogweed and try to make a difference in the state. So I am going to share my screen, turn off my video. And again, if you have any questions, just put them in the chat. I think Jason's going to be monitoring that, and I'll be happy to take those questions. At the end, I'm also, I don't know how it really works, but Jason, if there's something that comes up that's an immediate question that's relevant, feel free to ask it midway. If we were in person, you'd be raising your hand and we'd be interacting. So, this is for you, not for me. So if you want to know something, let's see if I can help, make this valuable for you. Okay, so video off, screen on. Oh, screen 2. Share. Okay, is that working? Yes? Perfect. Trying to get the little chat over so I can see it as well. Well, that's not going to happen. Anyhow, if you let me know what the chat is, I can't pop that up. So Jason's very clever. He titled this one, "Ouch, This Plant Hurts, New York State DEC Giant Hogweed Control Program." So I'm going to spend today talking about the life history of giant hogweed, how to identify giant hogweed, safety should you come across giant hogweed. I'm going to tell you about our giant hogweed program and how you can connect with it, and then how you can help as an individual and then also as a government employee. We'll start with the first part. So where is giant hogweed from and how did it get here? It is native to the Caucasus mountain regions in like Azerbaijan, like southern Russia, northern Georgia. It grows up high in the mountains. But even there, even in those countries, if it goes down into the lowlands, it can become an invasive species as well. And how did it leave its area? I love this article. Someone sent it to me many years ago. And it's an article, an old scientific article from 1901 from a horticulture journal. And it talks about these two botanists that traveled to the Caucasus mountain regions and collected a lot of seeds and brought them back. And it talks about how they sent them to amateurs and people who cared about plants around the world. So in 1901, these nice guys went and collected all these seeds and spread it around the world, and then giant hogweed soon escaped cultivation and spread around where it wasn't welcome. Interestingly enough, I don't know how small this is on your screen, but if you look at this picture up here, Can you see my arrow when it's moving around?
Yes, yes, we can.
Yes, okay. So the person who sent it to me and said, well, maybe the reason they don't care about, giant hogweed is because back in the early 1900s, everyone was fully clothed. Nobody went around in shorts and t-shirts. So they didn't really experience the dangers of giant hogweed. So how do you identify giant hogweed? Well, when it's an adult, it's pretty easy to tell, right? It's a very large plant. It can be 8 to 14 feet tall. A person would just be like this, this height. The flower umbel can be like up to 2.5 feet across, so like bigger than a dinner plate. It's not Queen Anne's lace, which is just like the size of your hand. The leaves are really huge and like sort of deeply incised, so you can picture like a maple leaf that's got lots and lots of jagged edges on it, and that's obviously much bigger, really huge. But the one way that you can always differentiate giant hogweed from any other plant, no matter what life stage it's at, is this right here. It has a green stem with purple blotches or spots, and then it will have coarse white hairs all along the stem. And right where the leaves attach, it'll have sort of like a thicker amount of these little white hairs. So there's other look-alike plants that will have coarse white hairs or purple stems or purple spots on the stem, but there are no other plants that will have the combination of both, the green stem, purple blotches, and the coarse white hairs. So we get most of our reports to our information line sort of mid-June to early July when the plants are flowering. This is the best time if you were going to go out and be like, I want to know if it's in my community. You'll notice these adult plants. They're very hard to miss. However, if they can still be around in smaller, in smaller stages. So they start as a little seedling, then they get a little bit bigger and they get even bigger. But you can see in all of the stages, well, you can't see the seedling, but they still have those purple blotches and coarse white hairs. Then this is showing how the leaves each year, the plant grows, it dies back, it grows back the following year, just a little bit bigger and consecutively, 3, 4, 5 years before it gets enough energy in its root to bolt and flower, and then it will die. This is a picture of, I love this picture, one of our technicians, Jeff, who's been with us for almost the whole program since the first year, and these leaves can get really, really huge. It's really impressive. Another way to identify giant hogweed is by the stalks. So when we first started this program, this was one of the main ways that we found where the giant hogweed plants were located, because nobody had done the control the year before, so all the plants had flowered and set seed, and then they leave behind these long stalks. You can see in the background, those are Japanese knotweed stalks. So there are other dried things that are tall that will be there, but if you did find something like this, then you could look down at the new vegetation growing below and see if it had the purple blotches and coarse white hairs. There are lots of lookalikes or plants that people report to us. The top row here is giant hogweed, wild parsnip. I'm not really going to talk about this training too much, but it is another plant that has the same health hazards as giant hogweed. It looks quite different. Some of the main ways to tell wild parsnip is obviously the yellow sort of greenish flowers. The stem will look a lot like celery and has like ridges in it. And then wild parsnip leaves also look a little bit like celery. The other two that we get a lot of reports on are Angelica, which is a native plant, and that has the smooth purple stem, these like softball shaped flower heads, and like much smaller group of small leaves all together. And then the one that's most commonly mistaken for giant hogweed and really looks the most like giant hogweed is cow parsnip. It's in the same genus as giant hogweed. This is our native version of giant hogweed, but it grows much smaller. It doesn't have, it has smoother hairs. In general, it doesn't have the purple blotches, but there are some I guess some types in the state and, you know, around the country that do have purple blotches, like in the Catskills, there's some purple spots, but the hairs are always very different. The leaves are not as jagged on the end. And then the main difference too is if it is flowering, I don't know if you can tell, but this flower head is much, it's not anywhere near as robust as that flower head, and it goes like straight across. There aren't enough rays to make it bubble up. Oops. But giant hogweed, its flower head sort of will curve at the top like a little umbrella. And those are both native. They both can also burn you to a lesser degree, but you know, they do have benefits for our pollinators and other insects. So where does giant hogweed grow? It grows best in moist, sunny areas. It loves streams, to grow near streams. It can also grow in forested areas. This is like a shady area down here. It just might take it, instead of 3 to 4 years to flower and set seed, maybe it'll, you know, an individual plant might be in the forest for 6 or 8 years before it flowers and sets seed. It's very common along roadsides, and I also have a little collection of photos of, I can't believe giant hogweed is growing next to people in these situations. So we have lots of pictures of, you know, this is the worst tire swing in the world, right? It's surrounded by giant hogweed. I don't know who would put their kid on that tire swing, but I have pictures of it surrounding pools and hunting stands, tree stands, and slides, and all sorts of awkward places. So we do our best to remove hogweed next to children, prioritize it over all other sites. This is, again, I sort of alluded to this already, but this is how giant hogweed works. It starts as a seedling from a seed. It will form a rosette of leaves. It'll, you know, grow all season, then die back, grow again, die back, grow again, getting bigger each year until it gets enough energy in the root to flower and set seed. It has the dead stems and then cycles around again. So one of the reasons why we can even have a control program is because of this growth delayed flowering, right? It's called a monocarpic perennial. It flowers once and then dies. So we have like a few years to get to each plant before it flowers and sets seed. As I mentioned, it spreads through seed. An average plant produces about 20,000 seeds. Some have been reported to produce as much as 100,000 seeds. Most seeds fall within 10 meters of the parent plant. Most of the seeds are within the top 5 centimeters of the soil, and they can be viable for more than 5 years. So once a plant, you know, drops seeds, you're going to be controlling plants at that site for many years. It spreads in a variety of ways. It spreads through people, right? That's how it started, and that's how it still spreads around. It was planted by gardeners. People might cut and use the flowers and then dispose of them afterwards. There was some reports many years ago of a wedding that had them as their flower bouquets. I don't know if they actually would have gone all the way through to setting seed, though. But the main ways that giant hogweed spreads is through water. You know, all the plants that are flowering and dropping their seed into the streams, they go downstream. Mowing is another really big source of spread. Soil transport is another method, and so is wind. So why do we care about giant hogweed? We care for a number of reasons. One is its environmental impact, right? If you look at this one picture here, what can grow underneath a mat of giant hogweed? Not too much. It comes out earlier in the spring than other plants. It grows quicker and faster and larger, and it replaces native plants. The other problem is when it dies back in the fall and the winter, there's nothing else there to hold the soil together. And so it can cause soil erosion, especially if it's on steep slopes, which can impact streams and fisheries. It also limits access to recreation areas. Who wants to go fishing when they have to walk through a patch of giant hogweed? It also We have pictures of it in like ball fields and playgrounds. It is not, you know, it impacts people's ability to recreate safely outdoors. And then lastly, we care about it because it's a human health hazard. This is a picture of one of our technicians that was burned many years ago. And, you know, we don't want people to be experiencing that. And lastly, there is a law that prohibits possession of giant hogweed along with a host of other invasive plants with the intent to sell, import, purchase, transport, introduce, or propagate. So how do giant hogweed and wild parsnip cause a burn? I just want to make sure, can you guys still hear me? Because on my second screen, all the pictures of everybody just disappeared.
Yes, I can hear you just fine, Naja. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm not sure where that went, but it's good that you're still there. It's like, I hope I'm not just doing this presentation to myself.
Oh, I can hear you.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, all, you know, I had all the little pictures in the corner, but they all just disappeared. Okay, so you're probably wondering how giant hogweed and wild parsnip causes a burn. So all parts of the plant, the leaves, the stem, the flowers, they all contain several photosensitizing furanocoumarins, which can get on your skin if you touch or break the plant. So, you know, if you brush past it, if you're weed whacking or cutting, and you get that sap on you, and then if it comes in contact, so you have a couple things you need. You need the sap, you need the sun or UV rays, and then you need time. So if you get the sap and on you and you were in a dark room and you got no UV rays, nothing would happen. Conversely, if you get the sap on you and you wash it off right away, nothing would happen. But if you get the sap on you and you get UV rays on your skin that activate the sap, then as soon as 15 minutes or with this peak of like 30 minutes to 2 hours after it happens, that's when it's strongest, then your skin basically becomes unable to protect yourself from the sun, sort of like an anti-sunscreen, and you can get these really severe burns within a day or two. So it's not like a rash like poison ivy, it's actually like a burn. And if you're, you know, sweaty or have moisture on you, that can enhance their skin reaction even more. So over time, if you look at these pictures, you know, it's very acute in the beginning, but over time, it just turns into like a darker skin. And that's like your skin protecting itself from future impacts with the sun. But over many years, as long as you keep it out of the sun, you know, typically the scarring will go away. So what would you do if you contact the sap? You would just immediately wash the area with soap and water. You would just take a big Band-Aid or a bunch of cloth and just cover the area from sunlight. And then if you did get a reaction, you would continue to keep the area out of the sun to prevent further blistering. This seems to be a part that a lot of people aren't aware of. You know, they'll say, it just keeps bothering me. I can't get the rash to go away. But that skin is still sensitive to the sun, even like a week or 2 weeks or a month later. So you need to keep the burned areas protected from the sun for a long time to allow it to fully heal. And it's always recommended to see a doctor because there is certain medicines that they can give to people to reduce the severity. And our crews, when they go out, they always have like an ability to wash right in their vehicle, and then they take this little pack with them out into the field in case they get sap on them while they're far from the vehicle. So how can you prevent this? The first thing you can do is learn to recognize and avoid these plants. So hopefully you guys learned enough from the start of the presentation that you can at least, you know, recognize giant hogweed and learn not to touch it. If you do ever have to work around these plants, you know, maybe your highway workers or your town staff, they should wear waterproof clothing. So, you know, our crews wear like Tyvek suits, but you could be as simple as just wearing like a rain suit. Definitely eye protection, rubber boots, waterproof gloves, long sleeve shirt. And then everybody should wash themselves and their equipment with soap and water after working near the plants. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about our control program. This little picture here was very interesting when we came. This is a site in Long Island, and they had put a little sign up for us so that we knew where the plants were when we arrived. I thought that was very cute. Hogweed. So when we started this program in 2007, there were 378 known sites that had been reported to APHIS. They had a hotline at that time. And I said, oh, sure, I can do that. Well, I can manage the hotline. They didn't want to do it anymore. So all the hotline went to, the new hotline number became my desk phone. So note to everyone, if you ever take over a hotline, do not make it your desk phone, make it some other generic phone. Does not go directly to your desk. So I don't have that number anymore because now we get thousands of calls every year. But anyhow, as of this year, starting our season, we now have 2,666 known sites. So it's not that over this time period, we gained a lot of sites. I mean, I'm sure we gained some, but what happened is once you start looking for something, that's when you find it and you educate the public, they start reporting it. In the beginning, I don't think as many people knew about giant hogweed. And one number here down at the bottom, if you'll see, there's 1,476 of these sites currently have no plants, and that is directly due to our statewide giant hogweed program. So more than half the sites no longer have any plants due to prior control.
Naja, this is Jason. It's interesting. It seems to be concentrated in sort of Western New York and the Finger Lakes and not a whole lot in the Hudson Valley or North Country or even Long Island, where you'd think there'd be a lot of people looking for it just because of the population density. So is there, did it start in sort of the Western parts of the state? Are you seeing it move eastward, or is there something about the climate or topography or geography of sort of the Buffalo Rochester area that lead to this?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I have talked about this with other people before as well. So it did start, like one of the very earliest reports we have is from an herbarium in Rochester. So we know it was here in the very early 1900s. So certainly over time, it can grow. I would say most of these parts in the east are due to individual plantings. This patch here where somebody planted it and then someone else wanted it. These are all, fairly recent-ish, last 20 so years. Over here, we have something that's been there for a really long time. And if I had the streams marked greater and it was in a closer scale, you would see that a lot of these are along stream corridors, right? Buffalo Creek is just infested. I have a section with stream survey, a little bit of stream survey data later, but I think there's something about the long streams, the time, and then there must be something about the climate or the soil, I would think, and the space that just has allowed it to spread. I mean, again, a lot of it's through spread, right? It spreads through streams, roads, and then like some of these big farm fields just get infested. I don't think we have maybe quite as many of the streams and the big farm fields in the east.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me. I guess my next question is, are neighboring states or Southern Ontario, are they seeing giant hogweed as well, like Pennsylvania or Southern Ontario?
So Pennsylvania has a lot of giant hogweed as well, but they had a very active giant hogweed program before we did. They actually helped train us when we started. And so they controlling their sites pretty well. And then the person who was managing the program, moved to something else. And I don't know if they've continued. And then I also have gone to Canada to help train them on starting their own programs. So they also do have along their streams and riparian corridors, some hogweed. And Vermont has like a smattering, but they're just not doing anything about it. So there's a very good chance they have it. They just don't know about it. I mean, they're just not looking for it. People aren't reporting it as well.
Right. That's interesting. Thank you.
And then like in Long Island, I mean, there's a good chance it's in a lot of those old, like wealthy homes and gardens, but nobody's reporting them to us. You know, it's very different when we go down there.
Right.
You know, we're on these pretty fancy houses, you know, in the backyard digging up hogweed that was planted a while ago. So I just assume that there's probably a bunch that they're not telling us about. But yeah, it doesn't have the same ability to spread, I think. If I had more time, there's so many questions and things I'd like to look into.
I understand. Yeah, no, this is it's
that's
really
the best I can answer at the moment.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is a very nice map. This shows all of our sites that once had hogweed that no longer have hogweed. So the purple ones are what we consider eradicated. They have had no plants for 3 or more years, in consecutive years. And then the blue ones are ones that are still being monitored. So they've had no plants for just 1 or 2 years. And hopefully a bunch of them will be purple next year because we didn't actually visit most of these monitor sites last year due to COVID. We had to triage our sites. So we prioritized our small sites and skipped our big ones and skipped our monitors and just told landowners to tell us if they had any hogweed. Oh, and I should just say we also do revisits. So even though these ones are purple and there were no plants for 3 years, we then give them 2 years off, visit again. So like year 6, give another 2 years off and visit again year 9. Just because we have found that, you know, like 10% of those eradicated sites will get plants again. Either because there's a different, you know, a seed that germinates from the soil, or they're on a stream corridor where stream is coming downstream. I mean, seed is coming downstream. So I put this together so in case you guys wanted a closer scale to see what directs, you know, what numbers look like in your counties. I think these are the 9 counties in your region. So this is just a little table. You can look at it by the county level. This is our number of eradicated plants, number of sites that are still in the monitoring stage, and then ones that have like our smallest sites, just 1 to 19 plants, 20 to 99, as you can see, and they get bigger and bigger as they go on. So your region does really have, if you look at the grand total, right, there's 1,037 known sites in your group of counties, and there's only, you know, 2,666 known sites statewide. So, you know, a little less than half is just in your 9 counties. So that's why I was very glad to come and speak with you guys, because you are our target audience. But this is also a really nice number down here. 574 sites in these areas don't have plants right now due to prior control efforts. So we have more sites without plants than sites with plants. And then I went through the list, Jason, that you sent me, and did the same thing for the township level. For those of you that might be attending this plant. So I'll just leave this up for a second for you guys to look, if you wanted to look at your own town and see where things stand. On the township level, it looks like the towns that are attending do not, in general, tend to be the ones with the biggest sites. So for your area, you're looking pretty good.
This is great, Naja. Thank you. And if possible, if you could make this presentation available for us to post on our local government workshop website as a PDF, so folks can look at that information if they like, that'd be great. But we can talk afterwards about that.
Yep, no problem. So just an overall idea of what our giant hogweed control program is. We have sort of like 3 different parts. I was going to say legs, but obviously we don't have 3 legs. So 3 different parts to our program. The first part is outreach. We have a ton of information posted on our DEC webpage about giant hogweed. We do, our social media people do a bunch of tweets and FaceTime things. Obviously that's not what I do, but so they do a bunch of posts throughout the summer. We have a number of outreach materials. So if anybody wants brochures or posters, we can provide them to you. We do presentations and trainings when time allows and people request it. And I see I'll look into Brighton afterwards. And then we have a giant hogweed information line, which is people can contact through phone, through email, through text, and that's a place for reporting new sites. It's a place to get help with identifying suspect plants, so people will send in photos. About a third of our reports are giant hogweed, and the rest are other lookalike plants. And if people, do have giant hogweed or wild parsnip, we will give them information about how they can control it, and we'll connect them with our statewide control project and send someone out to control it for them for free. And then we have our control part of our program. We also have a number of partner agencies or PRISMs, the Partnerships for Regional Invasive Species Management. A lot of the Eastern New York PRISMs will do all of their own sites, and we mostly manage the sites within Western New York PRISM and the Finger Lakes PRISM because there's just too many sites for the two PRISMs to handle on their own. So we control it through manual and chemical control. We also monitor sites, and we also collaborate with local, county, and state agencies. So if any of you wanted to become directly involved in controlling hogweed within your town or county, we would be very happy to train any of your staff. Anytime you can do multiple rounds of control, you're going to get rid of that plant so much faster than just our one visit a year. So this is just some of the outreach materials we have. Brochures, posters, a lot on the website. We have a control methods guide for people that actually have giant hogweed, and it gives like in-depth information on how to control it. Again, our website is a really good resource. Our information line, this is Dan. He's been our information line coordinator for multiple years. So if anyone's called it, that's probably who you've talked to or one of our interns. And we get a lot of calls. And, I guess it's 25% of reports, not 30. So that is a really good resource in helping us find new sites. Again, I mentioned before, our collaboration helps our efforts go farther. We can control so many sites, but having the PRISMs do their outreach and control for their areas allows us to get to a lot more of the Western New York sites and Central New York sites. So this is just an example. I used 2019 because 2020 was kind of an anomaly, right? We had a different kind of a season. But in general, we visit most of the monitor sites and the sites with plants, and we'll get 100 to 150 of them will become eradicated. Usually find 100 to, again, 150 new sites. So it's kind of, right, you're getting rid of some and you're gaining some at the same time. I'm hoping one day we will get rid of way more than we gain, but we typically visit a couple, right, we visit most of the sites, and then we control a lot of plants at the sites that do have plants. And we have been incorporating stream survey with it since 2018. And also we get lots of calls and lots of visits to our web pages. So our crews in general, they're each given about 150 to 200 sites. They have to contact every landowner. They have to get permission to visit the property. Unfortunately, New York State's law for DEC that allows us to go onto people's properties, whether they want us to or not, only applies for our insects and diseases. It does not apply to plants because they weren't really considered back then when they had that law. So if somebody says no, then we can't come on the property. So I put our goal as our goal is eradication at all sites where we have permission. And then we visit each property once per season. Some of them are visited multiple times when they're really large. You can't, control it all in one time. And the crews then update the site information. They take photos, they survey the area, they perform control, they take points and polygons, and they leave a control summary for the owner so they knew what we did. This is what our crews look like. Mostly they just wear this Tyvek suit, or they'll just wear pants and the gloves if the plants are really small. Some of our herbicide crews will wear respirators. It's not mandated, but it just gives them a little extra protection if they're doing a lot of herbicide work. So the control methods that we use are root cutting. So we'll actually, if you look up here, this is dug out. This is not what we would do, but it's just to show you. There's these little lines where the leaf scars from previous years are. And all you have to do is take a shovel and sever the top part, the root with the leaf scars from the rest of the root below it. And then that plant is dead and should not come back. So it's a very effective method. And when we started, people were really kind of, I don't know, they didn't think that we could have a control program with a manual component at that time. I think people probably think differently now, but it just sort of thought you could only control plants with herbicide. Said, well, it plays a really good role when we need it, but if we don't need it, we're not going to use it. So at all of our small sites, like 400 plants or less, we do root cutting. And then our larger sites, we use herbicide. You're not going to root cut a patch like this or larger. And then the last part of our control methods is flower or seed head removal. So any plant that flowers and sets seed, we then remove the seed head and put it in a bag and leave it in the sun for a week or two. Just one thing in case you decide to do this on your own, you have to wait until the flower sets. The flower turns into a seed head. If you remove a flower head and then don't control the rest of the plant, it will just grow back more flowers. Here's some pictures showing before and after control. So for root cutting, we just go through and sever through the roots and the plants stay on site. They were dangerous before, they're still dangerous after, but then they'll sort of decompose and go away. It's too dangerous for our staff to move all of these stems. If you remember that first burn picture before, that was actually how the burn happened. Within that first year, somebody had asked our technician to move the plants and they were just exposed to too much sap and ended up burned. And then we have herbicide where the plants stay on site, but then they just wilt away. And then we have flower head removal, where you come through, you remove all the flower heads, and then they went back and sprayed or dug up the plant, right? If this was seeds, you could just go through and remove the seed heads, and you don't have to control the plant because once it flowers and sets seed, that individual plant is dead. This is just showing over time how the red ones are the root cut sites. The site's root cut and the blue is the plant's root cut, and you can see that over time our sites are getting such that we have fewer plants at our small sites. And this is just a visual example. I could show you a bunch of different ones like this. This was a site in Livingston County that pretty much every July our information line would get tons of calls about this one site because you can see it from the road. But you can see in 2009, when we got it, it was really large, had tons of old seed heads. And then in 2016, 97% less herbicide was needed to control the plants at the site than was used in 2009. So that, that means there was some mixed in here, but visually you can see it made a really big difference. So I like to say we're doing a really good job, and I think we are doing the best that we can do, but we definitely still have some control challenges. I don't want to, paint a completely rosy picture, but some of them are due to our success. This first one here is a picture of a number of people that are needed to go out and survey at this site, because it used to have a lot of plants and needed a lot of control, and now it has few plants, but it's still over a really large area. So you have to find them. If you miss a plant, over in the woods or in the periphery and it flowers and sets seed, then you're going to start all over again. So it becomes a challenge to make sure we're finding, all the plants at these larger sites. Another challenge here is just showing seedlings, the fact that the seeds stay viable in the soil for a really long time. This one here is a landowner of a really large site in Cayuga County who does not allow herbicide control. There's no way to control this site without herbicide. So what we do is just do the seed head removal along the edges of the property so it doesn't spread to other people's properties or up and down the road. And then this is just showing that sometimes if the staff don't put the root, like if you leave it in a wet area, sometimes they'll resprout. And our other challenges are that sources of spread still exist. So roadside mowing is a real problem. I'm hoping if the one thing that happens, if one of you takes this information home and brings it to your highway department and says, please do not mow giant hogweed when it's in flower or seed, that would make a huge difference. And the streams are another problem, right? You can see there are these long stream corridors. Well, if you have someone upstream that refuses to allow control, that means no matter how many times we control all of the plants downstream, there's still a continual source of spread. And some of our landowners that refuse control are along streams, and that is, you know, a perpetual challenge for us. Oh, here, this leads right into it. So these are sites where, in your counties, where owners refuse to allow DEC access for giant hogweed control. So if any of your towns or counties wanted to pass a local law or ordinance that mandated landowners to remove noxious weeds, that would go a long way to allowing us to control giant hogweed in your counties and towns. There are a few, like Onondaga has a countywide law, and that changed one of these landowners that didn't allow us to do control, and now they do allow us to do control. And I think Erie County might have one on the books as well. We've never had to use it, but we've been able to talk to a landowner and say we can mandate this, and then they let us on their property. So, you know, it's just most frustrating when they're along a stream or along a road and they spread to other people that don't want it, just because people don't want us to control their plants. And this is just showing that, you know, we continually do find new sites as we're looking for them. And this is about our stream survey. So we've wanted to do stream survey for many years, but we never had the time or ability. We now have an internship with ESF. So we have a few extra staff each year, and we've been able to do a little bit of stream survey, which has been great. So over 3 seasons, they were able to visit 584 tax parcels or properties, survey 66.4 miles of stream frontage, and you know that work led to us finding 106 tax parcels that had giant hogweed, 65 which are new properties or landowners for us. So we have plans to do some more out towards Syracuse this year, because we'll have a couple extra interns based in that direction, and also to get some more work on Buffalo Creek and a couple other creeks as well. But it's really hard work. And this one shows them in a canoe, but in general, most of the streams actually just have to be walked up one side, back the other. So you may ask yourself, is this really possible to get rid of giant hogweed in New York? I think some of the things that help make it somewhat possible, and again, like I said, you have to say, is it's only eradication at sites where we have control. But the plant does that later maturity, allows us to control the plant before it sets seed. Our control methods are effective, they work, right? If you can just cut through a root and it kills it, or spray it, and that plant is dead, it's controllable. Not all invasive plants are easily controllable. It also struggles to hide in plain sight, right? Once it's an adult flowering plant, if it's anywhere that somebody's going to pass by and see it, there's a good chance someone will report it. I think there's probably areas where, you know, that it's not along a road or an area where people go that has giant hogweed that we don't know about it. And we're actually partnering with someone who's doing a drone study this summer who wants to either use actual drones to fly over certain areas or potentially use satellite imagery during the flowering time to try to find some of those spots that we're missing. That would be great. It isn't spread by wildlife. We have had consistent funding. I wouldn't say we've had enough funding, but we've had enough to have a program, every year, and most landowners are cooperative. I think due to the harmful nature for them, like maybe if it was an invasive plant that couldn't harm them, they wouldn't be as cooperative. But because it is harmful, they're in general really happy to have us come and remove it. And I other think the thing that has made a difference is just our perseverance. We've been doing this for a while, and going back to the sites once a year, even though it's not as much as would be ideal, with more funding, once a year over many years makes a difference. So this was behind a school in Wyoming County. And when we started there in 2008, there were over 10,000 plants. And in 2018, there was just 14 plants that were root cut. I don't know what it was last year. Oh, I don't think he was able to go last year because it was too large of a site for just one person for the survey aspect. But I mean, this is a great, I was here when in 2009 it was massive, and then look at that, it looks so much better. So how do you report a site if you do find giant hogweed? There's 3 ways to get in touch with the information line: email, calling, and text. The email and phone are on our brochures and our posters and the website. So if you ever want to connect with our program, all you have to do is Google giant hogweed and you'll go right to the DEC website. And what we're looking for is directions to the site. If for some reason you have GPS coordinates, that's even more fabulous. Sort of an estimate number of plants, and that's so we know whether or not to send the site out to a root cut crew or an herbicide crew, right? And then we want photos. We won't confirm a site without photos because there's so many plants that people confuse with giant hogweed, and we are so, I guess, short. I would say we're still short-staffed. We just don't have any extra staff that can go out and verify things. So we do ask for photos. In the instances where people can't do photos, we can often partner with a Cornell Cooperative Extension, and they might send someone out to take photos or verify the plant. And that's been really helpful. And we're looking for a picture of the whole plant, the leaves, the stem, the flowers if they exist, and the seeds if they exist. So as an individual, what you can do to help is, be aware and observant. Learn to identify giant hogweed so you and your families and friends know not to touch it. If you see anything, make a report to the information line. If you do have hogweed on your property, we can help you for free. You just have to sign a form for herbicide use to let us come on your property for that. But otherwise, verbal approval is fine. We'll survey for the plants. We'll control the plant. And helping stop the spread and encouraging others to report and allow control of giant hogweed is really key. And then how can local government help? I would say there's 5 things you can do. Educate people in your town or county. We have a number of outreach materials that you could put in your town halls or at meetings, or signs that can go up in your library, posters. So provide information to the public and staff. Report sites that are found, so train your employees and friends and family to report hogweed sites to the DEC information line. Remind them that it's free. We don't share their information with anybody. We're just there to control the plants. We don't report anything else. Stop the spread, right? If you could train your highway department staff to not mow plants after they set seed, flower and set seed would be amazing. The same for wild parsnip. And control. If anybody wants to learn how to control hogweed, or a town wants to be a quicker effect than we can do, we can just come once a year, but a town could go do the control in May, and then we could come back in June, July, or August and do a second round of control and get those plants out faster. And then enforce. Anyone who wants to pass a local noxious weed law, especially where we have a landowner that refuses to allow us to come on their property, that would be amazing. So, and I just want to thank all the people all the organizations that have funded us over the years, and then all of the people. I think we've had almost 100 staff over the past 14 years, and their professionalism and dedication has made a huge difference. So that is that.
Great, Naja. Thank you so much for that presentation. I I learned a lot, and I hope folks attending did as well. One question that I had before we get into any of the ones people might have in the chat window there, is there any? I think if I heard you correctly, currently there is a state law that lets you go onto properties for invasive insects and maybe something else, but not plants.
Disease, right? For forest health issues, which are insects and disease.
Okay.
You know, if someone has oak wilt, we could say we're coming on whether you like it or not. Not that we not that we often do, but just having that ability is helpful.
Yeah. So my question, is there any initiative at the state level to change that to include plants, or are you going more after, like you mentioned, a couple of counties have done this at the county level. I was just wondering if there was any movement at the state level to do anything on that.
I think the movement that was made on the state level was that not the noxious weed law, but the invasive species law that prohibited the having or planting or any of a whole number of different invasive plants and animals and other things, but it does not, it's sort of like if you have it already, you're just kind of grandfathered in.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going to sort of work on trying to get a state law passed, but then it was deemed by higher ups that might actually end up with our other law being taken away. So let's just leave things be and
I
do the best you can for plants.
Can appreciate that. So we had a question about the specific sites, because you had the maps. The question was, is there a list of all of those? And maybe that does get into the landowner privacy. I don't know if you're able to list like tax parcel numbers or addresses or things like that. So
we don't, though. I think everything that's done at a statewide level is, at a government level is foilable.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't provide it. We're not going to provide anyone's like personal information, but I think the locations of the hogweed is foilable, and you can find some of the sites on IMAP invasives as well for giant hogweed. We have such a big data set. I don't know that it's quite up to the most recent couple years, but they have a lot of our sites on their website. So yeah, I don't share it, but I think it could be foiled if people wanted to know. And with like towns, if they're doing something very particular, like we do share the, a simplified data set of locations. Like if a town was going to say we're actively go out and survey for more sites, or wanted to know where they were, we could share that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because that. So, like, if a town highway department wanted to know more about, what has been identified so far in their town, that would be something.
Right, and then know to report. I mean, I've given them to other towns and counties before, and they start really, gung ho, but I've never gotten anything back. I have to say, like, I'm happy to provide it, but I'd really like to get some information back in return too.
Sure. Yeah. No, I can appreciate that. Great. Well, any other questions, comments? You're getting a lot of good feedback, positive feedback in the chat, but I'm not seeing any other questions right now.
I did see one question about Brighton, but I would have to just look on our spreadsheet and see. There's a good chance that if you didn't have Brighton listed in your job description or something, not the job, like I just took the list of the towns. So if Brighton wasn't listed, I didn't
I went back to look, and maybe that didn't get to you, but I thought Brighton was listed. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to follow up with.
So yeah, I can send it to you, and then you could send it to the other person, or I can update the presentation, and then that one could go online. If I did skip Brighton, I apologize, Brighton.
You got a question about a lot of sites along the Genesee River. I imagine that's a good portion of what's identified for Monroe County.
Where's Where is Genesee? I know on our stream survey, I list some of the ones we've surveyed anyways, but here's my stream survey.
Oh yeah, so that actually
Oh.
it just says Monroe County stream sort of collectively there.
Right. Yeah, I again can look at that if somebody had a specific question. We do have, I know Genesee River has a lot of hogweed, but Monroe County also has hogweed all over it. It's got a lot of hogweed and not just on stream corridors.
Yeah. I mean, I live in the city of Rochester, and I've been, watching my yard for it. And what I found really helpful was sort of your images of young giant hogweed, because one of my fears was always, well, obviously it's giant, but it starts out small because everything starts out small. So how do you identify it when it's little? So that was helpful.
Yeah, again, if you always just look at the stem, and even the little seedlings will have like purple spots and the little coarse white hairs. So, I mean, there's other things with hairs or purple spots, but not so many with both.
Yeah.
And again, if you don't live on a stream corridor, it's not going to like come from a bird. It's either going to come because you planted it or someone else planted it, or it came from the stream or your neighbor's property.
Right.
You have to have a stream, a spread, a source of spread.
Yeah,
and one last thing, that I just didn't mention that I should always say in these things. I know it can be really scary, right, to look at all those burn pictures, but it is on a plant, right? So the plant can't move and get to you. Only you can move into the plant. But it's really true. Like, we have had people call the information line, like almost with mental health issues, fearing this plant. So if you do have it, or if you see it, just don't touch it and you're going to be fine, right? And we can come wearing our, just waterproof gear. Like, it could even be dishwashing gloves and a rain suit, and you can handle the plant and then just wash up afterwards. So it's really like, with knowledge, you can be around this plant safely.
Yeah, no, that's a good reminder, because I'm thinking back to like growing up in the 1980s in the country in Western New York, and there was a whole lot of things we didn't worry about at the time, and it just feels like in the last 30-40 years we have ticks and Lyme disease and giant hogweed and lots of things my parents and I didn't think about as roaming around the fields as a kid in the 80s. So it can be kind of scary, but that's a good reminder to keep it in perspective. And I have to say, for those of you and your colleagues who are donning waterproof gear or Tyvek suits in June and July to work on this, our appreciation to you, because I'm sure it's hot, sweaty work in the summertime.
It is. You have no idea how much moisture your hands can create. It's kind of shockingly appalling when people take off their gloves. Just like, where did all that come from? I always say they should pay me for like it being a weight loss job or something. But I don't think that's appropriate. But yeah. All right. It is. They're really dedicated. They're amazing. The people that do the work are a special kind of person. So.
Well, our kudos to them and our appreciation. So keep up the good work. I know it's hard work, but it's important, and it looks like you're having some good success. So I'm not seeing any more questions or comments. So at this point, I'm going to say thank you all for attending today. This was really great. A big thank you to Naja
you're welcome. My pleasure.
And sharing her information, and of course her and her colleagues for doing all this great work. And have a good rest of the day, everyone.
Thank you.
That's good. Great. Thank you.